Hello, everyone. I am the amazing Gary Gomes, and I'm here to talk with you about Vedic, ironically stated, of course. And I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology, how it affects how the planets reflect the activities on Earth and vice versa. And this will be hopefully a more condensed version over the of what I've been discussing over the past few months because I've noticed the videos have gotten rather long, and I think you deserve a shorter, more pithy video and something you can look at your leisure and not feel like you have to spend a large amount of time with me. So I'm going to try to keep it under an hour, and we'll go from there. So if you do want to contact me for lessons or readings or anything like that, please call me at 508 or text me at 508 525 0001. I do charge for readings. I do charge for lessons. I can't say the price just because of certain restrictions I have with this particular medium I'm working in. But I do readings for people. I do charts for people. I suggest remedial measures as Vedic astrology allows that. And so again, the number to contact me at is 508 525 0001. And I'll repeat that 508 525 0001. All right. And you can also email me at GaryGomesG@gmail.com. Again, that's GaryGomesG@gmail.com. All right. So there are no dots in the first part. It's all one word flow and all one word flow. And there's the finger. And yeah, just contact me. Even if you're curious or if you want to know more about where to learn Vedic astrology, or if you have general astrological questions, please, uh, it, it'd be fantastic if you subscribed. It would be great if you commented. I like to hear from people, and it would be fantastic um, to hear from anybody. And also, you can hit the notification bell so you can be informed when these videos are uploaded. Okay? All right. So let's start in with it. First of all, I have to correct an error I made last week. Mercury is already retrograde. It is not about to go retrograde. It is already retrograde. Went retrograde a couple of days ago. And so I think one of the things that happens is Mercury retrograde tends to become the fall guy for a lot of things that we just slow down and look at more carefully. We probably could avoid, but it is Mercury retrograde. Now, one thing I have learned through the years, and this is just a little piece of advice I can render to you. You usually get great bargains on things when Mercury is retrograde. That's the plus side of it. On the negative, it's not such a good time for buying cars or electronic things um, or um, any kind of technology devices or communications devices, mainly because Mercury retrogrades tend to expose faults or problems with the product. So it's not universal, but it's more likely to happen during those particular periods. Also, communications will be more easily misunderstood. Let's look at the chart and I'll show you. We're going to move right into the chart. If we can get it up. That's not the chart I wanted to show you. Let's see now. All right, so this is in real time. It isn't as slick as other astrologers, I'll admit, but I've never really been a fan of editing. And so you can see from this chart, so as I'm talking right now, we have Jupiter retrograde, uh, and that little underline down there means Mercury retrograde. And it's a new moon. So that's actually considered to be a relatively good time to start things. It's in Scorpio though, and it's aspected by Saturn. So in general, this is not the most this is not the luckiest time to start new activities. If you want to do something in terms of improving yourself or in terms of trying to learn new things, even with Mercury retrograde, that's probably not a bad idea, but it'll be a lot of work because Saturn's aspecting Mercury. Okay, so Saturn throws 10th house aspects on the chart. If I want to use what are called Gemini aspects, Saturn is aspecting Mars, Mars is aspecting Saturn. There'll be a tendency to be, I would say, really too tough on ourselves over the next few weeks. And I did want to correct one more thing. Jupiter won't go direct until sometime in early March. So we're stuck with this retrograde Jupiter in Taurus for a couple of more months. Now, that's really not the worst thing in the world, but it does make us a little bit more um, overly optimistic and overly stubborn than we would normally be. So so I always have this respect for Jupiter as a planet. Jupiter is highly respected in all astrological systems, but it has flaws, like every planet does. Saturn has good and bad attributes. Venus has good and bad attributes. And one of the things about Jupiter retrograde that's a bad attribute about it is it tends to make us a little bit overly expansive or overly optimistic. It can often help us learn things, but it also makes us a little bit egotistical about what we learn. So there are downsides about Jupiter. And so it's good to know these things when you're in these Jupiter subperiods, so you don't conflate your importance. I'm not asking you to put yourself down, but you don't want to conflate your importance, or you don't want to act like you know everything. Um, and I think, given the fact that I have more intimate knowledge of Jupiter retrograde than a lot of people do, but it's a fairly common phenomenon. You know, it's not a bad placement, but like I said, a little bit overreaching, a little bit overly ambitious, and Saturn tends to temper that down a little bit, but Saturn's not aspecting Jupiter right now. And really speaking, for economical considerations, we don't want Saturn aspecting Jupiter. We really don't even want it aspecting Mercury and the Sun, to be truthful, because that's giving a lot of stubbornness in governments across the world. It's giving a lot of resistance to change, you know, and again, depending on your position in the world, there can be even some leaps into what I would call unreality or excuse making with a Jupiter retrograde. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I think this is true from both sides of the political spectrum, or all sides of the political spectrum, excuse me. But the planet which is most important to look at over the next week is really Mars, because Mars will be going retrograde around December 7th. And it'll move back into Gemini in late December, early January. Now that becomes important because Mars is debilitated in this particular sign. It's at its weakest point in this particular sign. Mars, as I've said many times before, is not only a planet connected with war or injuries, it's also a planet connected with strategy and logic. So Mars is, I think, the most misunderstood planet in astrology. It's really not, it's direct. That's probably the thing that you can say most strenuously about it. And that directness is often equated with theft, rudeness, aggression, things like that. Uh, when it moves back into Gemini, I think you'll see more efforts at trying to make the peace, but you'll also see more efforts to lie across the media, across multiple media platforms. And again, this has become a theme of me, but I one of the charts I do want to pull out is just quickly is the United States chart I use and get that goof off there. US chart. All right. So if you use the chart that Jim Kelleher developed years ago, um, based um, upon his observations of U.S. history, uh, Jim, this is a roughly, let me just see. Yeah, this is roughly consistent with Jim's chart. I don't know if it's Jim's chart exactly, but it's proven useful for me. It did help predict almost to the week uh, the housing crisis in 2007, in 2008, actually, during the election, essentially when the markets just fell apart. Um, and so, so to me, this chart has validity in terms of identifying the Great Depression, identifying um, the progressive era in United States history, and we're actually in another progressive era right now. But getting back to this particular point, Mars has this a directness about it. So a lot of people's emotions are kind of fired up right now. They're kind of but in a more passive way than normal because Mars is in Cancer. When Mars hits Gemini, and itself will be Mercury will still be there, Venus will have moved, but it might still be there. Now, one of the things about that is, again, as I've said before, the Mars Gemini combination is very important for deceit, lies, twisting the truth, those kinds of things. It's so if you want to look at it in a more constructive way, um, there'll be more of a temptation to mislead or lie. There'll be more of a temptation to hide things. There'll be more of a temptation to create narratives. Now, Mars is in the US chart. Let me pull that chart out. Hold on a second. Is right over Mercury and Rahu in the US chart. Okay. So this is our media. It's a retrograde media. And it's also with Rahu. So it's all media is inflammatory to a certain degree, but the United States has made an art out of it. And this also represents the commercial interests connected with our media overall. So again, there's nothing that you can see, and we have a Mars, Saturn, Mars aspect in the chart, which actually as a country can make us very hard on ourselves. Uh, I'm not saying I'm not saying we're a perfect country by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not familiar, and I'm a history buff. I was actually a history major a, for a couple of years in college, but I changed my mind about what I want to study. But I've never seen a perfect nation. I've never seen a nation which hasn't had some level of war, some level of oppression, some level of religious intolerance. There are some that are more extreme than others, but you get the gist. It's almost always there. And so I think that when you're looking at these things, it's important to keep in mind, excuse me, that there's no such thing as a perfect country. There's no such thing as a perfect society. Some attributes of other societies may look preferable to you and may see your personality better or your goals or your ambitions better. Um, but but God in particular, and against a lot of countries, especially in the West, because of the colonial legacy, excuse me, the colonial legacy, do share a good deal of blame for what's wrong with the world. But again, they weren't the only ones. Okay, so it's important to remember that. I'm not saying they haven't contributed to most of the problems we're encountering in the 20th and 21st centuries. I think they are, but also they represent opportunities. So this could almost turn into a discussion against the benefits of globalization versus the drawbacks to globalization. Yeah, but I don't want to get into that right now. That's not appropriate right now. But basically, you will see a drawing away from globalization or an attempt to at least rein it in over the next few years, and that's consistent with the chart, especially with the United States chart in particular, going forward, because our last Rahu Mahadasha, we were um, we're involved globally, but not as intensely as we have been over before 2016. And so certain governments, so essentially, the idea of a regime change is not a new idea in the United States. It has been practiced for either for advantage um, or for other purposes many times over the past 100 years, but not solely practiced by the United States. So again, um, without getting into a long and detailed history, the French have certain possessions uh, in Africa, which is currently giving them trouble. Um, the British are having British policy was the Commonwealth residents could uh, take up residence in the UK, and some of the Commonwealth countries were from population groups very different from the main British population. That's caused some tension in England, and it's not necessarily um, a factor of connected with xenophobia or anything like that. It's just these are new people. Um, and everybody has to get used to everybody else. So when somebody moves into the area, you want to open them with open arms, but there's always an adjustment period, right? Okay, so think about it as a new addition to the family or something like that. And that's had complications for these countries. It's had complications for France, Germany, England, even to a certain extent, countries like Turkey, uh, Japan. I mean, there's been a massive worldwide immigration um, movement, the likes of which we haven't seen really since the early 1900s. And so that's going to have some pushback, mainly because things aren't comfortable and things never are in periods like that. So it's it's understandable. I'm not justifying it in any way, shape, or form, but it's understandable. It's comprehensible. It's not all that weird. So, so talking about the Mars retrograde, Mars going back into Gemini, um, that could encourage peace developments, although Mars will still be aspecting Venus around that time, and it will definitely probably be aspecting Mercury around that time. So Venus only has 2 more days in Capricorn, in Sagittarius, excuse me, before it moves away from this hypersensitive placement in Sagittarius and into a more settled and auspicious position in Capricorn. Mars has roughly 7 more days before it turns retrograde. And you'll sort of see anger peak around that time, I think, or hurt emotions peak around that time. But, and I would tend to say the month of December will be relatively uncomfortable emotionally. Be careful driving. That's always my word to people when these movements of Mars occur. And I was asked about the possibility of earthquakes. Maybe not so much earthquakes as sea disasters or travel issues coming up. And I I think that in general, because of the Jupiter and Venus aspect, or the Jupiter and Venus interaction in the chart, the stock market has been incredibly optimistic over the past few weeks, which is good. You're going to see financial markets improve. But when Jupiter enters um, Capricorn, then about another month or so enters Aquarius. Capricorn likes Venus. It makes it feel predictable. Venus and Saturn are good friends in the Vedic chart. When it enters Aquarius, you might see a little bit of a slowdown and a little bit of financial fallback. That really won't be a panic. I would say around April 15th, you'll see what I would call economic disruptors occurring. So that's just a general overall view. It depends really on country your chart, uh, what chart your country uh, is involved in. But most of the major powers, most of the major players right now have important planets in the mutable signs. So China has that. Russia has that. Uh, I haven't looked at the Japanese chart lately, but Ukraine and Russia have their rising signs immutable or changeable signs. So they're called Dvishabha signs in Sanskrit. And all of this with Rahu and Saturn hitting Pisces and using Gemini aspects, all the movable signs being hit, there'll be some foundational shifts by the end of April, you know, and institutional shifts. This is why you're seeing so much, at least in the United States, in terms of scandals connected with politicians, movie stars, and big figures in society. So I expect to see a lot more between now and March, and even some consequences from some of those activities in between mid-April and May. So you're going to see some big figures um, either embarrassed or humiliated or maybe even penalized. Uh, I would say before June of this coming year. Um, and I'm going to do my regular annual um, charts that I normally do, but I do them in several sequences or different times of the year. So I'll do one for the calendar year within a couple of weeks, and I'll do one for the official New Year for Makar Sankranti around January 15th, and I'll also do one for around April 15th for the actual uh, New Year when the sun enters Aries. Okay, so we'll get to all that over time. Okay, so but from this chart, Jupiter aspects Sun, Moon, and Sun, Moon, Mercury. Venus is in Jupiter's sign, so that's actually giving a good feeling of optimism. Practicality comes in within a couple of days. Saturn's finally moving, is finally picking up a little bit of speed. It never picks up much speed, but it's finally moving towards a little bit of speed. But just a cautionary note: the last 10 degrees of a sign of a malefic planet tend to be more dangerous than the um, first 20 degrees. For Rahu's just about to enter that last 10 degrees because Rahu moves backwards. So you'll see more disruption, more rebellious tendencies, I would say, over the next um, 6 months than previously. Uh, there have been some crackdowns on the campuses in the United States, um, and in terms of protests. And while I can't say um, I'm surprised that has happened, this has happened. Like as I said before, this parallels the 1960s incredibly well. Um, and but you have all these really interesting aspects between Jupiter and Mars and Saturn and Mars if I use the Gemini system, and also between Mars, Sun, Mercury, and Moon if I use the Gemini aspects. So, so essentially, these are difficulty in terms of wisdom, difficulty, and Venus will be involved in that particular set very shortly as well. So you have, according to Gemini principles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets engaged with each other, at least 6 planets engaged with each other over the next few days. So it'll be a challenging time. I don't think it'll be horrible, but uh, and again, we have had, just to touch upon what's happening with the incoming administration, we have seen bomb threats coming into certain administration or certain pending nominees, and in some ways that's connected with this Mars and Cancer. So it's more, so the violence isn't upfront and personal, it's more threatened, it's more from a distance. Uh, it's not it's not immediate. So again, just be very careful driving, just in general, just be very careful driving. Try to be careful in terms of what you say. I'm not telling you to shut up. but I'm encouraging people to try to be at least have some modicum of politeness or forced politeness over the next few months. Not, so if you're, um, and also don't try to justify things too much. If there's things you can see you disagree with, and I'm as guilty of this as the next person. Sometimes the better course of action is to just say, well, how much of a difference will this make in the long run? Is this something that I'm going to make people hate me over for no really good reason because it's not an important issue? And just um, try to be calm. That's the best advice I can give everybody during this. And try not to be so emotional because neither one is going to get you very far right now. You know, this Mars will, when it ducks back into Gemini, some of those communicative issues will improve, but they'll also get a bit more aggressive. And so, so essentially things are fixed for the next, I would say for the next few months in this sort of like pattern of maybe unrealistic expectations, but also living in unreality. Um, and just try to keep your head above shoulder. Keep your head above the You keep your head above the shoulders. Keep your head above the ground. Keep your head out of your emotional center. Um, Try to not over catastrophize things because there's a huge tendency to do that uh, during these times, especially when Rahu is a planet which is always in panic, paranoia, or fear, and that prominent Rahu in this chart is a driver. Okay. All right. So let's go to the actual signs for the. So let's go to Aries. At that discussion went on a little bit longer than I thought it would. I apologize. And so Aries has Mars in the fourth house, so this sign will be a little bit overly emotional again. It'll probably hit stages where you'll want to be careful, especially towards the end of the week. Be careful on how you address people, or you'll blow your top, basically. Um, and again, that may be necessary depending on your circumstances, but it's usually not a good idea. Uh, Jupiter's in the second house, so you'll stick to your opinions no matter how right or wrong you think they are or anybody else thinks they are. That's just Jupiter being stubborn in this chart. It'll moderate it a little bit because Venus is in the eighth house. So there's always this, I'm sorry I said what I said, kind of element to dealing with real life. Again, be careful, especially in water, especially driving, especially around water and water connected objects. Okay. That includes things like electricity, because Mars and Rahu between them kind of rule electricity. So the fourth, the third house of ambitions or desires, there's a strong ambition to gain some money from unseen sources, which is fine. And some may come in, okay, at least from a spouse or relationship partner. Mars sits in the fourth house. I've spoken about this a lot already. I think you know what it does, but it can make this sign in particular very short-tempered. Um, Fifth house lord is the sun. The sun is placed in the eighth house. So children will be a little bit difficult to deal with, a little bit hidden away, a little bit sulky. Um, Sixth house has K2 in it, excuse me. And K2 is connected with accidents or illnesses, so the sign should be really careful when it goes out. In terms of cold, I'm not advocating people wear masks. That's not the idea. But especially in large party gatherings, be careful about about accidents. Be careful in particular about this is true for everybody. Be careful about your liver and your kidneys because there's K2 producing unexpected results in that part of the body. And seventh house Lord is Venus is located in the ninth. This actually gives relationship partners some luck from relationship partners, although they'll be overly sensitive. Sun, Moon, and Mercury are in the eighth house. Can give some financial boons, but more likely there'll be a strong desire to be alone or left alone, to be honest. Saturn is the Lord of the 10th house, located in the 11th house. Good time for gains, but Rahu, again, try to curb the urge towards overspending this month. I know it's going to be tough, but just try to curb that. Things are you can keep things relatively stable, but you'll probably see some inflationary pressure this month. For Taurus, let's go to Taurus next. Taurus has Jupiter in the first house, is Lord of the 11th and the 8th house. Venus is the Lord of Taurus. So there's a nice exchange between the 8th house and the first house. And this will make this sign seem very sexy indeed, very desirable indeed. Um, can lead to a little bit of overeating Jupiter's. If I've seen that in any chart, especially um, signs like Taurus, which are essentially sedentary or stable charts, there's a tendency to overconsume if Jupiter's in Taurus. Mars is in the second house, Lord is Mercury, located in the seventh house, good for financial gains through spouse. Um, Mars is in the third house. Strong desire for movement forward, but not a lot of ambition to do it. K2's in the fifth house. Some problems with children are indicated, or some health issues connected with them. This isn't a serious problem. They'll just maybe some of them will just seem a little bit spoiled or cantankerous. Sixth house Lord is Venus. Lord of the sixth is in the eighth. That's a cancellation of it's what's called a repeat Raj Yoga. It's really not a Raj Yoga, but it's a repeat yoga. So you have the sixth Lord in the eighth house. That's basically good for overcoming enemies or diseases. So that's actually a good placement. Sun, Moon, and Mercury are in the seventh house. That's a good combination actually for this sign because relationship life will be a center of attention, although there'll be a little bit of a down period right now. Eighth house has Venus in it. We've already spoken about how desirable that will make this sign. Saturn is in the 10th house, a lot of work. Rahu's in the 11th. Good friendships, but again, a little bit superficial, but nothing to really worry about. They'll give you some good financial gains. Mars is Lord of the 12th house and is located in um, the third house. So there's a strong desire to spend for this sign. So again, like I said, it's not the end of the world. Just try to make sure your credit card bills don't get out of hand. For Gemini or your other expenses. For Gemini's Lord is Mercury is placed in the sixth house, indicates this planet or this sign is undergoing some difficulty with both family members and also with children. Okay, uh, because this Venus in the seventh house rules a house of children, and children will be adversely affected by this combination. Mars is in the second house, so again, it's kind of doubling up on family issues. Mars is aspecting the fifth house, so the child will seem a little bit um, angry or sullen or difficult to deal with. When it moves back into Gemini, you might see some improvement in that, but it's going to move back into into Cancer, excuse me, uh, in a few months down the road. So yeah, you have to be a little bit conscious of that. Um, the other thing is, so children will seem to be a little bit more willful or a little bit more resentful. Let's see now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Relationship life should be good, but again, relationship partners will tend to show a little bit less interest than they normally do because the planet is weakening as it goes towards its end. Uh, Capricorn is the eighth house of this, excuse me, it's the eighth house of this particular sign. So relationship life will seem to be a little bit dull or dispirited. Saturn's in the ninth house. Good for professional progress, but very slow. Rahu's in the 10th. A lot of impatience with professional progress, but that will come later this year. And Jupiter's in the 12th. So again, we have to watch out for overspending. For Cancer, Mars is in the first house. It does some good things by being in that placement. You have an exchange of lords between Mars and the moon in this chart, although the moon is very weak, it still does offset that. This is called a Parivartana Yoga or a mutual exchange combination. And usually when this happens, this will increase financial benefits. And although there'll be a tendency to spend on small things and also increases desires or ambitions to accomplish more in life because Mercury's involved in this combination. But some good potential for wealth, at least this month, this week, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's interesting that the Renato like Legna is in Libra because this is a month that's connected with purchasing. It's the most commercial month, I would say, of the year. So that's interesting that showed up. I haven't done any research on it, but it's just an interesting coincidence. Let me just, should be, from that it should be a fairly good Christmas season. Just saying. And let's see, Mars is K2's in the third house, so a lot of ambition connected with the sign, a lot of fearlessness. Um, Venus is located in the sixth house. Lord of the fourth can indicate some problems with family members. Sun, Mercury, and Moon in the fifth house can indicate depression to children or a lot of energy focused on children for this sign. Seventh house Lord is Saturn. Saturn's located in the eighth house. So again, there will be a little bit of disenchantment or disengagement from relationship partners. And Rahu is in the eighth house. I'm sorry, Saturn is in the eighth house, not Rahu. And again, this is one of the most important Saturn transits. So essentially, it goes back to the theme of restructuring your life, restructuring your priorities. And that'll be good for this sign. It will lead to increased economic strength, but not really until after March. We have Rahu in the ninth house, which is good for making new contacts, and Jupiter's in the 11th, somewhat good for increased financial success. For Leo, Leo has K2 in the second house. That will make this sign rather fearless in terms of what it says, excuse me. The first house Lord is in the fourth house, so there's a strong connection with family and power from this combination. And also increased wealth. The third house has K2 in it. I'm sorry, the second house, we already said that. Um, the fifth house has Venus in it, which is normally a good placement. It can give increased career success for Leo. Sun's in Leo, this is August 15th to September 15th, just to clarify. And also some good potential for love affairs or romantic involvements, but more focus on work towards over the next after 2 days or so. Saturn's in the seventh house indicates stability in relationships, and Rahu's in the eighth. A lot of interest in digging behind the scenes and finding out what's hidden in the cellar, those kinds of things. So this could mean occult investigation, or you'll be more involved with digging and research at work. And Jupiter's in the 10th house, good for career goals and career ambitions. For Virgo, Virgo has lovely Ketu in the first house and lovely Rahu in the seventh house. So no new partnerships for you right now. Just be careful about business deals or partnership deals over the next few months. That's for Virgo. And finances will grow regardless of new partnerships because the second lord is placed on the fourth. It's about to be placed in the fifth. That's generally a good combination for success in partnerships or success in general for the sign, not success in partnerships. Excuse me. And we have Mercury and Sun and Moon in the third house. So this will be a time in which you're trying to focus on really getting exactly what you want, both in relationship life and in um, partnership life. So again, don't settle for just anybody that comes along in either your personal life or your professional life. Be a little picky, be a little bit discriminatory or discriminative. Excuse me, that's the better word. And you'll actually go further. I don't want you to be discriminatory. My apologies. Saturn's in the sixth house. It's located, is actually not a bad position for Saturn. Mars is a little bit better placed in the sixth house, but Saturn can also fend off enemies and defend the champion, uh, or depend the person, the star, whose rising sign is Virgo. Rahu is in Pisces. I think that particular combination will tend to, I'd advise against relationships. I mean, you can certainly start dating somebody or seeing somebody, but I wouldn't get serious about anybody until at least July. Jupiter's in the ninth house. That's a good placement. It'll give more relationship opportunities over the next few months. So if something doesn't happen this month, don't worry, something will happen next month. The other thing is Mars is in the 11th house, so friends will tend to be a little bit peevish or difficult to work with. For Libra, um, Libra has, as I said before, the Varnata Lagna, and that's Libra's a sign connected with trade or with value. So essentially, if we look over here, the sign is desiring good value, is desiring increased bargains. Okay, that's maybe the best way to put it. Family life will be relatively pleasant for this sign, despite the hypersensitivity. And if we have the fifth floor going to the sixth house, there will be some struggles with children, but not a great deal. We've already spoken about Rahu in the seventh house. Just don't do it right now. Jupiter in the ninth is acceptable for taking some financial risks, but don't go crazy. Remember, Jupiter's still retrograde. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And Mars is in the 11th house. That's actually a good sign for friendships causing some problems to the person. So I think, um, just trying to think of it. I think when you put that all together, it's not a bad week for Virgo. But again, there is some caution indicated, and also not a bad week for Libra, although career life will be mostly focused on money, on financial aspects of life. So, so essentially, Jupiter's Lord is not in a good sign for it. Okay, or I'm sorry, Libra's Lord is not in a good sign for it. It can make us impulsive or overly sensitive. Um, but overall, for Libra, the fourth Lord is in the fifth house, so it encourages study. Rahu's in the sixth house, it gives some anxiety over health issues, but those should be resolved. Jupiter's in the eighth house. This is, again, a good combination for overcoming illnesses. And Mars is in the 10th house. There'll be some resentment or some um, difficulty in accepting career life, but that you won't be able to change that for another 6 months or so. So just go along for the ride, and I think you'll be surprised how much success you can achieve during those next 6 months if you just stick to it. For Scorpio, we have Moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio. Now the Moon is fallen in the sign. It's really not in a good position, but it's a new moon. It's not really going to be a forever thing. And within about a day and a half, the moon will move into this nice combination with Venus, which will make everybody pretty happy. Um, and let's see now. I have Pluto in the third house, but I don't use that normally. And I have my reasons, and I've explained those before. Saturn's in the fifth house. Uh, I'm sorry, Saturn's in the fourth house for Scorpio rising or Scorpio sun or Scorpio moon. And again, that puts a lot of effort on home repairs and things like that. For this sign, Rahu's in the fifth. It will give some problems or some dissatisfaction with children, but overall good relationships with business partners and with wife. Mars is in the ninth house, but is fallen. And we do have that mutual exchange between between the first Lord and the ninth Lord. So essentially, this will give you more opportunity for financial growth over the next couple of months. For Sagittarius, Venus is placed in the first house. This is a very sensitive combination, as I've drilled home 1,000 times. Um, and basically, this particular sign will have some difficulties um, in not being hurt, but that's only for a couple of days. And it also has Saturn in the third, so we'll make this sign more ambitious. Rahu's in the fourth, although it does take a little bit of time to get moving. I know, I understand that. Rahu's in the fourth, and Ketu's in the 10th. So more concerned with status, prestige, position, because work life is still a little bit stagnant because of K2 there. But it does make a person a kind of a workhorse at times. That's the positive side of it. But again, this sign does like to get credit. It does like to get recognition. Okay. For Um, Sag, the Lord of the first, is in the sixth house. Um, Indicates a small um trying to, I was at a loss for words just then. Indicates a small over expansiveness in terms of giving gifts and receiving gifts. We have a planet in the sixth house and the eighth house, so relationship partners will probably waver between being very optimistic and very mean. K2's in the 10th house. That will give you some opportunity for recognition, especially as the year progresses, especially after March. Um, we have three planets in the 12th house. Again, not a good time to spend a lot of money. Uh, I'm not going to discourage you from doing that, mainly because I think it's good for the economy, but not good for you personally. So let's go on to Capricorn. Capricorn has Mars in the seventh house. That's a bit of a difficult placement for the sign because Mars in the seventh house will cause a lot of fights or disagreements with the spouse. The retrograde will probably aggravate it in about 7 days. For Saturn, Saturn is basically well placed for Capricorn. It's in the second house of wealth. Venus is in the 12th house, so that allows this sign to save money. So that's good. Um, but again, there will be a little bit of greed connected with this sign. And also, if I look at the fourth house or the fifth house in this chart, excuse me, um, you see Jupiter is well placed in the fifth house. And um, in terms of luck, you're going to have to make your own luck this week. And I think overall, if we go down here, we see K2's in the ninth, can give some unexpected gains. The Lord of the 10th is in the 12th house, so losses in business, but overall financial gains are indicated. For Aquarius, Saturn is in the seat of the king, okay, right now. So essentially what that means in world term, real world terms, wow. Basically Saturn will put a lot of pressure on addressing the needs of the working person. And also in this particular chart, it'll allow you to move forward with projects, with creative projects and projects that interest you, but there'll also be a really strong desire for steady income with Saturn in this sign. Rahu is in the second house. Rahu is considered to be like Saturn, so we'll probably restrict monetary flow just a little bit for Aquarius, rising of the sun. For Jupiter's in the fourth house, that's a good placement for it. It gives some comfort to the home life. And let's see now. Again, relationship partners look bumpy for these individuals. Um, the 11th house has Venus in it, which is actually a good thing. And let me see now. And um, let me just go away. I spaced out there for a second. I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else. But for this sign, some health issues are indicated again. Not really cancel out. They'll still recur a little bit. And Ninth house has Venus as its ruler. 10th house, a lot of career focus, a lot of career orientation, especially connected with the government, is implied. Venus is in the 11th house. That's actually a good thing because it'll help this sign gather funds and in order to finance future products. But the 12th lord is still in the first, so again, you have to be careful about money. Now, finally, last but not least, we're at Pisces with Rahu in it. In terms of what this says for Pisces, is it can open it up a bit to scandal because it won't be aware of what people are saying behind its back. It'll just be a little bit difficult to deal with. And Rahu's has Venus in the 10th house of career, so career life should be going somewhat well. And let's see, um, if we go over here, Jupiter's in the 3rd house. So again, good guidance is indicated coming from the sign. Mars is in the 5th. Again, the same recurring theme of difficulty with children. And let's see, and if I go all the way over to the other side of the chart, you have K2 in the 9th, Sun, Moon, and Mercury in the 10th. Basically, this chart wants to change. So for all this, I think we've covered all the signs. Now it's time to look at the astral mapping. If I missed any, or if you think I gave them short shrift, um, let me know and I'll be happy to post something additional. Okay. All right. So these are these are the charts, astrological lines. This is where we can expect to see either some good or some bad things happening. Uh, okay. So again, disputes over property, disappointment over property in Hawaii, that shows up again. Some dispute in Alaska over government interference shows up. There's a Saturn line right next to a Mercury line in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Doesn't really interact with anything very much. Yeah, so Jupiter and a Mercury, Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturn line. So of the three lines, Saturn is closest, it appears, to just eyeballing it, is closer, it appears, to California. And also one more thing, there's this California and the entire West Coast are sandwiched between Saturn and Rahu lines. So this could indicate some governmental scandals coming out of Calgary or Washington State or Oregon or California. All three are likely suspects. For the Venus line, it's running right through the center of the country, right from North Dakota all the way down to Midland, Mexico. And what that implies is um, let me see now. So let's get back to the star map. And so again, as I said before, we have a Venus line running right through Texas. Usually indicates rains. Can indicate some hidden wealth or hidden uh, oil wells. or things like that in that part of the country. It's very amicable to trade between China, Russia, and Mexico. Uh, and I think actually we will hit that point, but there'll be some initial bumps. I need to lean forward a little bit. My apologies. There's a moon line running through a Mars line right in Michigan, really both parts of Michigan, and also touching on Wisconsin. So you can expect to see some either protests or some kind of political activity in that state, in those states over the next few weeks. And let's see if it mentions anything else. No, that's about it for that particular region. Sun and moon are in conjunction in this chart, along with Mercury. So again, it's not necessarily a bad combination, but it's restricted by Saturn's aspects. So there'll still be this nudge to get people to fall in line. It's kind of a dictatorial combination. Saturn and Sun um, can reveal people who have dictators in their lives or who have worked very hard for a little reward. So again, these are both strong possibilities from this chart. There's a Mercury and Jupiter line going over Maine, New Hampshire, and it looks like a little bit of Massachusetts. That's actually good for financial growth for those parts of the country. And there's a third moon line running over North and South Carolina and West Virginia and the great state of Virginia. So that should bring some more rains there and also to the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Guyana, and also through the middle part of Brazil. We have a Mercury Jupiter line intersecting with I can't see what that line is. Oh, I can't see. Oh, okay. Excuse me. So we take this combination. We should expect to see some government uh, pushback or attempts at government censorship in, in these parts of the world. This is Venezuela, um, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and San Juan, and and essentially driving through the inners um, of that combination. It does indicate blind hope, so you can see how she copes with that. But the Sun Moon Mercury combination doesn't feel right. It does indicate some repression, and especially that's true in Brazil, Guyana, um, and also in no, it's just in Brazil. It's not really going to impact Uruguay or Paraguay that much. And I need to get a different size. 1 second. Yep. Let me correct this map. 1 second. So let's get this down. Oops. No, that's funny. That's what I want. Okay. So I am kind of worried about Brazil in particular, not because I have any relatives there, but because it seems to be increasingly restrictive day by day. Um, so we'll see what happens, but that is one of the countries I would identify for civil unrest in 2025. And there's a Saturn line going through it, so they are intending to suppress or repress the poor in Brazil or those who don't have any power. Mars is running through West Africa, and this is interesting because, as I said before, there are some problems with um, the French former colonies in Africa, and this is really close. I believe that's um, Libya. This is Morocco. That's Algeria. And I believe as we get down here further, you hit the Republic of Chad. And so let me just see how I can nail this up. Some possibility of political violence in West Africa and some arguments over fishing rights as well in that region of the world. For there's nothing in England right now, there's nothing in France right now, but it is surrounded by Moon and Mars. Now, what that means technically is we have a whole lot of energy from the Moon and Mars being focused on most of Africa and almost all of Europe. So, plainly put, this indicates um, a lot of issues connected with women, a lot of um, arguments based around women's rights and other rights, and that'll be continuing. As a matter of fact, Finland may get the blunt of it, and may get the problem with it. So if we go over here, this is near Ukraine. We have a Sun, Moon, Mercury combination, and Jupiter decides to join in the fray. So that can mean the beginnings of some diplomatic activity in that part of the world. Um, that's already happened to a certain extent in Israel, and this Saturn line is really close to Israel, so that to me indicates a ceasefire will hold, but there will be breaks or interruptions in it. That's the Hezbollah ceasefire. They haven't reached a ceasefire agreement with Hamas yet. Um, and it's only a 2 month ceasefire, but we can be grateful for small blessings at this particular point in time, I think. For, yeah, there's another moon line in Eastern Europe and over Istanbul and over Egypt and down into Sudan and all the way down into South Africa, over the Central African Republic. And Zaire, I'm sorry, not Zaire. Yeah, Zaire is touched, Nigeria is touched. And so is so are, so are most of the republics of Africa. And I think over the next year you will see continuing cooperation, although to be truthful, um, there are signs that some of this it's either outsiders or um, insiders with a lot to lose are trying to direct Africa's economy, especially on the East Coast. Uh, Saudi Arabia, instantly recognizable country, has lines going through. It has Mercury and Saturn lines going right through it. And again, if you go through something um, like this and you see Jupiter and Saturn, there are usually diplomatic and legal issues to be worked out with these countries. So I think that's what we're seeing in the currently in terms of the attempt to um, interpret free, interpret one side, and I think it's a smart move. Okay, so basically we have, I mean, the thing I'm most optimistic about this chart is the Jupiter line coming down here because it actually can set up the foundation for negotiations with Russia. Saudi Arabia will have some diplomatic issues or some problems with its diplomacy. It's had that for years. Don't tell anyone, but it's had that for years. Um, Rahu is dipping into um, Iran and a little bit into the Emirates. So there is some panic going on in Iran right now. So I find that interesting. Also, if you want to go over and extend that Rahu line over to, um, let's say, up to this Venus line in India, this could indicate some scandals in the government in India and also in Pakistan and Afghanistan. That's not exactly a surprise. Plus, Ladakh and being Ladakh region of northeast India, it doesn't look to be in very good shape for that matter. Okay. And let's see now. I haven't done yet. Mars is running through parts of China, parts of Russia, parts of Burma, I believe it is, and touching into Laos a little bit. Cambodia and Vietnam look like they're in the clear, at least for the time being. So there can be some civil unrest or some demonstrations in that part of the world very easily. Uh, you have a sun line going up through Japan. It is the land of the rising sun, right? But again, the sun line isn't coincidental. This indicates a kind of a rebirth for Japan right now, and it's almost like it's a new country. And it'll probably have to settle a lot of the privileges that they accepted under white businesses. Okay, so let's go over to that Mars line is ominous. If I'm being totally honest with you, it does indicate there is growing anger in that part of the world and also um, growing frustration. So whether or not that will lead to um, energy going up or going down, I can't answer that, but certainly Afghanistan and Pakistan have been through major problems lately, like major problems. Let's see now. We have, so we already spoken about the sun and the moon over Japan and also over the Philippines and also over Borneo and Indonesia. So that should be fairly good for those countries. But again, just a little bit of pessimism to start out. And there's a Mercury line going close, getting close uh, to New Guinea and passing through the Jupiter Mercury line and passing through Australia. So Australia should have relatively peaceful relations over the next few months. There might be some concerns about money, but overall, this isn't a bad placement. And finally, we have a Saturn line running right next to Korea. So Korea is feeling kind of boxed in right now. Uh, Australia, parts of Australia are as well, and parts of Japan are as well. So Japan's starting to come out of an economic, um, or was starting to come out of economic stagflation, but that's changed over the past few months. So we'll see what happens down there. And finally, there's a Venus and a Mercury line intersecting over the far east coast of Australia. I think that actually gives an indication that um, the economy should do fairly well, but um, I'm going to reserve judgment on that because Mercury is affected by Saturn, so there'll be a lot of governmental restrictions in that part of the world. And let's see now. Fine. Okay. So that's about it for this week. I apologize for fading out. My sleep hasn't been that good the past few nights, but I did want to give this broadcast a few to consider and to look at and hopefully to marvel at. But again, I I I do love all you folks. I really do care about you, and I do care about the world and what happens to it. So these will be some interesting weeks coming up, especially when Mars goes retrograde. We'll see how big an impact that actually has. Sometimes it doesn't have that huge an impact. But in the sign of Cancer connected with emotions, yeah, it's tough to see how it couldn't. All right, so let's close it for now, and I'll be back next week. I might try to post something in the middle of the week uh, and to apologize for drifting off into my own thoughts. And thank you very much for watching and have a fantastic week. There are always opportunities out there for you. Venus in Sagittarius moving into Capricorn, really good time for business ventures, really good time for maybe not new business partnerships, but for trade. So again, it's not all negative. Jupiter in Taurus is good for financial gains as well. So keep your chin up, keep your dreams intact, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye bye, everyone, and have a great week.